So starting with this particular article, so the Prime Minister is very clear in at least forewarning this time. Like we missed the trick the second time, but this time we are telling the people to uh, go for testing, tracking, and the most important thing is vaccination. So vaccine hesitancy is a common problem, right? So when vaccine hesitancy is a common problem, and we have seen how district administrations are pushing people to increase the dose of vaccination, but it cannot happen overnight. Apart from vaccine hesitancy, we also have to understand uh, the behavior of the individual cannot be controlled by government. Okay, it has to be nurtured, it has to be thought through proper education and awareness. So that's the most important takeaway, because normally before COVID, if I have told you, let's say a prime minister level candidate comes and says, please do this, please do that, okay, having his own personal charisma, plus he is a prime minister of the country, and people blindly believe him. When all these things are there, right, we generally assume, or we have a stereotype, like if he says, people will do that, okay. But not that, not 3 lakh deaths, okay, not the hospital bills, nothing is convincing the people to take COVID appropriate behavior, or develop that hygienic habits. Yes, just think about ignorance is bliss, right? So in that sense, we need to be very careful uh, for the future. Next is government is preparing for the third wave. So no technical details needed. Again, long-term utility is very, very less. How will it impact the economic growth? Again, it will definitely be very hard to tell at this particular point, because if vaccinations increase, if herd immunity or something like that actually works out, like let's say in theory, or around 30% of the population is getting the first dose of vaccination, right? Around 6% of the population, I think, got 2 doses of vaccination. What percentage of Indians are vaccinated as of today? So covid19.org, that website is there, right? So according to the most latest data, 6.1% of Indians are vaccinated, whereas 24% are vaccinated with at least 1 dose. Okay. So the covid19.org, it's a crowd. I mean, it's an open source website. It sources the data from government websites or government data. So it's very accurate to quote. And also they have projected in a pictorial format, graphical format, easy to identify, and all those things. Data-driven policy making. Now, that is the most important factor. The more number of people vaccinated, let's say 60-70% of the population is vaccinated, then by December, economy will definitely recover. We will have a wonderful budget next year. Or else, in between, if God forbid India goes through a third wave, then lockdowns will be imposed at local levels. If not statewide lockdowns, at least districts, right? So that will seriously hamper the progress of the nation. Now, Uttar Pradesh government wants to do some cultural or religious event, but Supreme Court is saying, please don't do that. And it's open to a lot of interpretations. Do we need all such things right now? Right? How will PM level candidate reacting to it? Does it impact the situation? It is telling. I mean, I don't see that there is a direct linkage between that and economy's performance. Right? It will be very hard to convert that into economy. It will be. It it. I don't see that. It's more like, probably for investor who wants to invest in India. Like, okay, if prime minister is involved, probably there may not be a third wave, so I can invest probably in India. So that kind of mindset might come into the picture, but I don't think he had that interest in the mind while he was saying that. Okay. Now, So the problem is when we say this particular yatra has to be stopped, the next follow-up question will be what about the other communities, about other religions? Sooner than later, they will have their own religious festivals. So all this kind of what aboutry will come into the picture. That is why we have to remember at individual level, fundamental rights are paramount. If you see here also, Article 21. Okay. See, COVID is a pandemic that does not have any religious bias or political affiliations, right? It's a great equalizer. It treats everybody equally. That is a specialty of virus, death, and all these things. So you may be infected, okay? You may not die, but you will infect 10 other people. One of them might die, and that is your fault. Okay, again, it's not a crime that you have wanted done that, but your sheer negligence led to the death of a fellow individual or a human being. That is really, really unfortunate. Okay. Next, I hope all of you are following this particular thing. Do you have an idea what happened here? In Madhya Pradesh, a boy fell into a well. Okay, as usual, when such incidents happen, a crowd will come together, right? A crowd came together to overlook what is happening, and it collapsed, and all those people also fell into the well. Okay, so this is the unfortunate reality of curiosity kill the cat. So that's really unfortunate. A teenage boy fell into a well. To see that lot of people went, okay, and at least 11 people have died to who went to see that particular thing, right? So this actually tells us that we need to have standard operating procedure. Whenever there is something, we don't need to create a drama. We don't need see a minor disaster. A individual fell into a well, okay, but now it became a huge disaster. So many people also lost their life. So we need to ring fence. I mean, SOP has to be developed. Again, unfortunately, I'm not blaming the police officers or the local municipal authorities. Everybody will be trying to help. But the thing is, this habit of curiosity, whatever is happening because of sheer population will come together, and that might create administrative hurdles also. I have to maintain the mob, I have to maintain the law and order. So SOPs can be created in future to avert such disasters. This is really, really unfortunate. In Hindustan Times YouTube channel, I think there is a small video clip also, really disgusting. Okay. Isn't it the moral of the address? Okay, so the simple concept being here, if you are rescuing, that's one thing. If you are an onlooker, that's a whole different thing, right? Of course, when a police officer is there, a fire officer is there, again, it's not your moral responsibility. It's like saying when 26/11 happening, the onlooker also has to fight. There are police officials for that, right? So trained people should do that. They will probably take precautions and all those things. Again, it's an unfortunate scenario, but gives an opportunity for governance. SOPs are the most important tools in the hand of a officer, because when everything goes fail, nobody will blame you, but when something goes wrong, everybody will blame the government, right? So that's unfortunate side of the government. If that boy was rescued, okay, nobody will actually remember, okay, fine, because they died, everybody will keep blaming the government. And so as a bureaucrat, it's your responsibility to take extra precautions. Sorry. Mock drills might help after creating SOP, at least to the uh, responders, at least to the first responders. Yes, definitely creating SOPs might help. Again, you don't mock drills might be possible in certain scenarios like a fire in the building, floods, or something else. But these kind of things, it's unfortunate. I don't think they're going to be planning, right? So I hope all of you have followed this particular news. A Indian photojournalist has been killed in Afghanistan. So that's really unfortunate. So we are seeing the true face of Taliban right now after the withdrawal of America. And there is already a moral debate going on whether America withdrew in a haphazard fashion without creating a viable alternative. Should the moral failure of all these things be put on the American shoulders? Yes or no? So such kind of discussion is being is happening right now in the country, throughout the world. So America is saying, no, we did not go away overnight. We trained the Afghanistan soldiers, and no other country in the world is willing to send troops to support the Afghan government, right? We haven't seen India, China, Russia, Pakistan. Nobody say the same thing except America. Nobody had that kind of interest. And having seen the failure of America, no, nobody is even motivated to even think of that. So Afghanistan is going to be totally dominated by the Talibans. We will see a lot of atrocities, very harsh interpretation of the religious books will be implemented in Afghanistan. And the most important thing is girl, child, and women. These are the these two specific groups will face more burnt, more abuse than any other groupings. Of course, minorities, other religious people, we don't even have to talk about them because most of them will be eliminated by this time, by the time entire Afghanistan is captured by Taliban. Yes. Now, what should India do? I mean, before this entire drama happened, we have discussed multiple times. I told you that Taliban will be Taliban, snake will be snake. We cannot have a good snake and a bad snake. And some of the columnists have argued that we need to start establishing discussion with Taliban. Right now, there is no law. Like literally, Jungle Raj is going in Taliban, and we don't know who is doing what, right? And even the Taliban leaders cannot control the lower cadres because once you see the guns, no opposition to you, you can do whatever you want to do, right? In such a scenario, when literally a Jungle Raj is going, what should be India's stand? Who should be worried about? Like, should we be worried about the 1,000 crores we invested in the parliament building, or entire country going to the dogs? What should be our moral priorities here? Don't say dialogue and negotiation. What are the ethical dilemmas here? Why will refugees come towards India? For that, first they need to cross Pakistan, Pak occupied Kashmir, then into Kashmir, right? I don't think both Santosh and Rajni have seen the Afghanistan India map, right?
Sir, India will do whatever it has done for Yemen or Syria in those cases, which is condemn the violence and then hope other people do the job.
Okay. I hope your first option is not IFS, Sharat.
No, sir.
Probably you should think of reprioritizing your orders. Accept the fact that there is nothing we can do right now. Wait for the right things to play out. Rescue as many Indians as possible from Afghanistan. Yes, we need to create a movie for draft for Akshay Kumar, right? So that's one thing. I think government has already done that. I mean, we have evacuated our embassies. The problem there is, you are directly saying we don't have lack of trust in the government. Provide the moral support to the government. Okay, wait and talk with them. Okay. So if I ask you a question like, UNSC has failed time and again to prevent human right violations or or to prevent creation of humanitarian crises. Will you agree? Okay, global consensus as a globe, as you know, as a planet as a whole, as a UN members as a whole, we failed to prevent these humanitarian crises. We have seen that in Yemen, we have seen that in Syria, we are about to see something in Afghanistan, and it's going to be very bad in Afghanistan. It's not something we want, but that is something that is happening, right? So there is no alternative to US's power. We can hate or we can love America, but we can definitely say that there is actually no second USA as of now. Even 1 year ago, if you see the newspapers, or 6 months ago also, if you see the newspapers, as long as American troops are there, okay, we haven't seen this kind of violence in Afghanistan. There were definitely suicide bombers, a lot of attacks that were happening, but this, like a tsunami sort of thing, like it's a suppressed anger has been, the pent up anger has been suddenly released, the sudden atrocities have been released. So all these things were not there. So America was actually making a huge amount of moral difference to the planet by stationing its troops. Now that it has been withdrawn, there is no alternative. Yes, and all those people who are shouting, we should talk to Taliban, we should talk to Taliban. The only thing they have in their mind, and again, is protecting our national interest and our choices. It's not, we are not actually worried about what will happen to Afghanistan, women or human rights and all these things. We are mostly bothered about our interests, which might become a national security threat. Then just to throw something, we are talking about the humanitarian issues, right? So can we use this in ethics and international relations? Still they are doing with vested interest. Since they are not doing with letter and spirit for the peace and welfare, can't achieve it. Again, see, America was there. America tried to do it in letter. Okay, let's assume that. But I mean, should we say that other countries also did the same? Because America was providing the peace, we try to do, or we try to chip away whatever we can. Okay, India may be a honorable exemption. India may actually be a very good example where America was promoting peace. India was developing constitutional bodies, hospitals, dams, parliamentary buildings, and all these things. But the rest of the countries, they were exploiting the peace that was created by America as a framework. They wanted to do business. They wanted to exploit the mines, minerals. But nobody was actually bothered about the long-term peace and solution of Afghanistan. Yes, so these are the various perspectives that one can look of this particular article. So please remember, there is no right or wrong. If you are looking at international relations, 99.999% of the times it will always be about national interest. Okay, and also we have to remember. Yes, exactly. So we also have to remember when it comes to national interest, ethics and morals don't take the higher ground most of the times. Very few occasions, these things will take the precedent. And if you turn the clock backwards, who destroyed Afghanistan? Russia, US, Pakistan. Very good. So everybody Everybody used that particular country for their own vested interests. And yeah, Russia also had a fair game, right? It led to the creation of Taliban. Russian atrocities led to Taliban. Taliban atrocities led to USS attack, and that is why Afghanistan is called as graveyard of kingdoms. No single kingdom or king was able to successfully control Afghanistan. So that is the vastu of that particular country. Okay, if you believe in such things, right? So let Pakistan try to control that. We will be more than happy. Okay. Now, bailout. If you remember, there was a juvenile article a few days ago, I think 13th or 14th in the newspapers, there was an article which says Supreme Court has given bail to juveniles. When they were arrested, they were juveniles. So the maximum punishment is 3 years for them, but they are in the jails for 14 to 20 years. Then the miracle, that is India, the Agra jail authorities did not get the bail orders for a week or so. Okay. And again, the case went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court now came up with something called as fast and secure transmission of electronic records. Now, so Supreme Court has framed a scheme. Okay. Isn't it a separation of powers? Isn't it the executive's job? Sorry. Democracy always learns from its own mistakes, right? So if you remember Afzal Guru, when Afzal Guru was hanged, right, his family members were not informed because the post took 3 days for them to get the order that he was about to be hanged after the final judgment of the president's rejection, and he was hanged within the 3 days. So they didn't even get a chance to say, I mean, they didn't even get a chance to meet him for the last time. Now, what did Supreme Court do after that? It said after 14 years, after the final rejection of the president, 14 days minimum time period should be there and the family should be informed. In the same way, because of this one particular judgment, what will happen is whenever a bail is given or some Supreme Court order has been given, immediately it is already being uploaded in the website. Now it will also be posted in this particular app or to the particular department. Then there cannot be any drama saying we did not get the orders. Now, long term, think about it. The same will be done for summoning. Yes, already we are doing this in this country. That if somebody sees if the court is calling you for something, some reason, if you are having 2 double ticks in your WhatsApp after seeing that message, okay, the court considers that you have been summoned or you have received the message. It doesn't matter who opened that WhatsApp message again. So because of having a secure app of its own, there cannot be any more excuses. So it's a good move using technology to reduce the bureaucratic red tape. Yes. It might be regarding in judicial fields like in court, in anything. Okay, executive's job is executive's job. Just because it comes to Supreme Court cannot create its own RTI Act, right, Santosh? Right to Information Act, Supreme Court, Right to Information Act, Lok Sabha. It cannot work like that. A parliamentary act is parliamentary act. It can recommend that government should create a mechanism where court orders are directly delivered to the prison officers. Yeah, it can suggest, I want this, and then government should provide it. Okay. We will see how much the judiciary will change under the present Chief Justice of India. How would it be an intervention? Again, it's a right move, but you tell the government of India that within, let's say, next 15 days, I need an app or something like that. Again, probably that is what is done by Mr. Chief Justice. Okay, I might be misinterpreting it. He might have recommended the government to create that, and government will think about it and all those things. Okay, he gave a solution. But what I'm trying to tell you is bureaucratic red tapeism can be broken down using technology. We have seen that. Nobody can claim now the Pinjra Tod activists, they didn't get bailed because police wanted to check their Aadhaar cards verification again. Yeah. Okay. India needs a renewed healthcare system. So this article is by Mr. Abhay Shukla. In one point or in one line, we can say this: we don't need privatization, right? We don't need privatization in this particular country, especially in relation to government hospitals. What we need is more accountability. What we need is more community interaction. So we have seen the failure of private sector spectacularly during the COVID pandemic. All the hospitals in the world, we never thought like all these hospitals will fall short. We actually used to think, I mean, at least I used to think personally, we have too many hospitals. Every hospital is a super specialty hospital. If you go to that Karmanghat Champapet Road, okay, I think in that particular street itself, there are like 10 super specialty hospitals. Everybody is a super specialty. There are so many hospitals, but only when we have actually gone through the COVID pandemic, we realized that all the health infrastructure in the world is not going to save the common man, right? So public healthcare is utmost important, and definitely what we need is more governance. We cannot blame population. We cannot blame lack of money. What we actually need is governance, right? So that is my interpretation of the article. I mean, this one and the below one, both one is about population.
Sir, I believe the same arguments, I mean, almost same arguments can be given to education also.
Yes, totally accepted. See, I have always argued these two things: public health and public. So keep human capital development within the government. You can outsource everything else. Army, defense, I mean, army in the sense security, defense, education, health, nuclear sector. Okay. And these 5 or 6 sectors can be kept with the government, and rest everything can be outsourced. And this craze of privatization is not actually going to help. Even now in the COVID pandemic, we are seeing, right, digital education, digital illiteracy and all these things, but majority of the population is still not having access, and they are dependent on the government. Now we can take American model. In USA, public schools, that public schools are the most important players. If we see Delhi have a very good education system. The municipal schools of Delhi are working fantastically, and they are creating envy to the private sector. So if government is having that will and interest, okay, they're actually doing a lot of things. But the problem is, the first and foremost important thing we need to ask is, who owns private hospitals and private schools? Okay, whenever somebody pitches for privatization, there is always a vested interest. The first and foremost thing is political lobby. Yes, so politicians have private schools, politicians have hospitals, and now that the vested lobby understood the importance of healthcare sector, I can guaranteely tell you, many people want to own their own hospital. They don't, right? If I'm super rich, if I have vested interest, if I'm having political connections, I will try to make sure that I also own a hospital in my portfolio, not only petrol bunks and gas dealerships. From now onwards, I want a hospital of my own. Why? If God forbid there is one more COVID like pandemic, at least I can have my own access. I can have my own ICU. I don't have to depend on third party, right? So just like after demonetization, the demand for premium paintings have increased in the country, right? People started storing their black money in paintings. Okay, people get innovative. After COVID pandemic, I think people will invest in hospitals, healthcare sector, medical shops. Okay. So that is where the drive will come from privatization. And not everything can be solved through privatization. No, opposite is equally true. We have discussed this in the class also. We cannot make public sector work without strong motivation. Okay, government has tried to nudge them. Government has tried to give them salaries. It is trying everything in the best capacity in letter and to an extent in spirit also to make the public hospitals work. That is not happening. That is why government is so fed up that instead of controlling the bureaucracy, it feels it's easy to outsource it to a private hospital, private institution. Both sides of the coins are equally true. But in between this gray area, actual vested interests who own this political lobby and private hospitals, they're happily able to persuade the governments to move towards this privatization. No pressure on you. You outsource a hospital, let's say to Apollo. Apollo will provide the staff. Apollo will do everything. All you have to do is provide certain amount of money to Apollo. The rest all is taken care. It appears like government is providing healthcare sector and everything is fine. Okay. Probably the fate, unfortunate fate, right? Destiny. If there was no COVID pandemic, how many of us would actually have realized or stopped this to this extent? And second thing, I mean, realize in the sense, any UPS aspirant worth his salt by the end of his preparation will realize privatization is a bad idea. The thing is, can we actually stop it? Now we have a more chance of stopping it because we have seen the failure of private sector. But if there was no pandemic, even if we tried, do you think we could have stopped the privatizations? I sincerely doubt that. The same is happening to education sector also. Wantedly, the government schools are being smothered. They're being killed. The best of the teachers are in the government schools, but the students are subpar. The so-called good students are moving away from the government schools to private sector, and that is leading to slow death of education sector. So all these things will appear like, private sector is doing better than public sector. So that's a misnomer. Governance has to come into the picture. Am I making any sense? Next, we have to learn from international experiences also, right? Again, I totally understand that privatization doesn't guarantee efficiency, but the thing is, it appears, I have mentioned this word earlier also, it appears that government is providing health services. For a government point of view, all I need to do is showcase that there is a government hospital, showcase that there are certain doctors, and I am taking care of the people. Forget pandemic for a moment and just think about normal times. A person goes to a government hospital, it's a free service. Service may be substandard. If he demands some quality standards, what will he say? If you want so much quality service, go to private hospital. Itna paisa mein itna hi milega. In the sense, we were tuned to that mindset that government is doing a charity, public hospitals are like this only. Okay, and I have told you, right, in front of AIIMS in Delhi, okay, people who are going through chemotherapy used to sleep on the footpaths. Okay, I'm not making this up. Okay, just understand. People who are going through chemotherapy, chemo is one of the most painful therapies we go through, right? We lose weight, hair, lot of side effects, vomitings, and all those things. Such kind of people are sleeping outside the footpaths of AIIMS because 15 days later, they again have to come for the second sitting. They don't have enough money to go back to their villages and come back in certain conditions. So they came and they are staying in 15 days here only. That is the level of poverty of this country. And he is desperate to survive. Okay. And the state have a limited capacity. There are very few government hospitals which have chemotherapy, and AIIMS Delhi is one of them. right? Nobody actually questioned that, and nobody bothered, because we hardly knew that that was actually happening, right? If I privatize it, what will happen? Still the same, right? As long as I don't have extra money, Apollo won't set up 20 chemotherapy centers. It will still maintain one or two, just like the AIIMS Delhi is doing. Then what will happen? You have a lot of problems, right? So this centralized model of AIIMS has to be diffused. First of all, each and every state should have multiple best government hospitals. Then a lot of funding should be pumped into this particular healthcare sector. Before COVID, as Aditya was asking, very few states actually bothered to answer about healthcare sector, because, as I told you, collectively, normally, like in normal times, again, please remember, in normal times, only a microscopic minority, the X group, were dependent on the government hospitals. Majority of us were totally happy to go to the government private sector, like normal cough, cold, I mean any normal diseases and all those things. There was no burden on the system. Depending on the money, you used to go to the best, from the best to the okayish hospitals. You never dependent on the government hospitals. Those who were dependent, they knew the problems, but they were microscopic minority, and it's not a political issue also. So states spend less amount of money. But in COVID, what happened? Opposite is true. Everyone was dependent on the healthcare system. That is why we have seen so much anger and pressure on the government towards healthcare sector. Clear? Again, this might sound like repeated ideas, but the thing is, we always forget why we were a collective, why we are a collective, why do we need certain things, why do we need things? Because we never imagine that, let's say I can be anyone, will actually one day have to go to a government hospital and sleep on the floor. Okay. Can we have the right to question the government when we don't ask it, when the wrong was done, but worry about it when we face it? You have the right? Again, personally speaking, Aditya, how many RTIs have you filed? I assume you are an empowered citizen, right? Yes, by you. You tried, but you couldn't. Okay, let's hypothetically say, who is your MLA or MP? Like both, if you know both. Right. So I personally don't know. I told this many times. Now, what I wanted to convey is, if I file an RTI saying how many government hospitals are there, okay, fine, very good. How many government hospitals are there in my particular area? How many doctors are there? How many vacancies are there? What is the amount spent on a government hospital? So on and so forth. I have filed an RTI. Let's take hypothetical in normal times, not COVID times. I was given a reply. Okay, unless I know a media connection, and there is a fault in the government side, I cannot take and cry, right? Like I cannot make it a huge motivational issue. See, we will go back. We are going off the track, but we will link all the dots one day. Priyanka Reddy case. Okay, when that happened, okay, everybody, like literally both the Telugu states were literally burning. Like they were so angry. Disha bill has been introduced, so on and so forth. Okay, after that, how many incidents happened? So many. We lost the count. We stopped counting. Okay. The same with COVID, the same with education, the same with health. Individually, I face an issue. Collectively, we are well off. Okay. So that is actually what people mean by India is a rich country with poor people, right? We are collectively well off. I mean, I am safe. Everybody is safe. I am rich. I can afford private health. I can afford education. So everything is fine. India is sending astronauts to NASA. What are you complaining about? Okay, but when we come to at individual level, that individual is never respected because his fundamental rights or his life was never respected. Yes. So again, what I hope all of you are understanding what I'm trying to tell you, right? The macro picture is, because there is no lobbying power of individual, only collective lobbying, right? And there is no proactiveness from the system's side. We are in this governance paradox. It appears like everybody is doing something, but at the ground level, still there are a lot of issues. So that is where the middlemen take advantage. He knows that there is demand. Why are ministers and all these people so hell-bent on investing in hospitals? Because they know there is tons of money to be looted. Okay, why do you see a sudden spurt of private hospitals? Arogyasri. After Arogyasri, okay, I hope all of you know this is an insurance scheme, right? Again, see, that is what I was about to come, right? The point I was about to come to this particular issue. So what will happen right now is insurance. Everybody will be covered under insurance, universal healthcare. Okay, Ayushman Bharat or Arogyasri and whatever. Because of this, there is a sudden spurt of private hospitals, and private hospitals know that there is a demand. X is still dying. Okay, his demands are not totally met. In spite of all these hospitals, still they need a resource, right? So somebody is ready to be exploited and somebody is ready to pay. That is government. Who am I? I'm the middle person. I have the best of the both worlds. If they die, nobody is going to ask me, but still I will get the money. If I treat them, that is totally fine. Right? Again, I'm not insulting doctors and all these people. Very good. There are always good people, but there are people who come into the certain areas only to make money. Again, I am talking about the middlemen, not the doctors. Middlemen can be the entrepreneurial owner who is setting up a hospital, not the doctor working there, right? So insurance will increase the cost of healthcare, right? So what will government do? Forget about private and public. What we will do is universal healthcare. What is that? Anybody can go to any hospital. It doesn't matter. You are covered. Okay, then why do we have to have this distinction of private sector, public sector? But in the long run, we have seen in USA, what happened is this inflation, insurance has created an artificial bubble. It increased an premium on the health. Everybody has to be insured. Right now, you can go to any hospital in Andhra Pradesh and see, right? Arogyasri, they will ask you, do you have Arogyasri? Yes. The minimum bill is, let's say, 30-35K. Yeah. So in that sense, government can pump money, but I'm still convinced that the middleman will take the most of the chunk, unless actually somebody realizes India can be the best country in the world for healthcare sector, assuming we invest more in public hospitals by public itself, like government itself. I have to be made the stakeholder. Can we have laws curbing the wealth of public representative above the affidavit filed by the... Again, we are talking about a lot of things. So, did you understood the insurance concept that I'm trying to link? It will create a bubble. Now, and there is one more disincentive. Unless we have education in rural areas or we have good facilities in the rural areas, doctors don't want to work in rural areas. Doctors don't want to work in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. So there is a lot of disincentives for the doctors to work in tier 2, tier 3 cities or even the villages, because they also have kids. Their kids should also get educated. They should have all the facilities. So they're missing out all these things. So it's a 360-degree review again. If you have to solve the health crisis, you have to invest in education. You have to invest in internet. You have to invest in e-commerce, logistics. So when you do all these things, automatically everything will take care of everything. The synergies have to be created. Okay. So as a way forward, I feel as a UPSC aspirant, what we can do is we can change the language that the states are using. Don't discuss about invest 4% of the GDP or 3% of the GDP. Talk to the states in the language they will understand. You will save 4% of the GDP if you invest this much amount of money. Save GDP, not invest GDP. Okay, the negative factor might be a good political rally. What I mean to say is, if you invest in sanitation, let's say there are every house in Andhra Pradesh is using a twin pit latrine or something like that, like proper sanitation and hygiene, we will save 2% of the GDP and add 2% more of the GDP in human capital productivity. Talk in the terms of return of incomes rather than how much you have to invest. Right? By investing in TV, we save this much amount of money. Okay. By investing in a wash, basic wash, sanitation, or fortified food, we save this much amount of money. Okay. Prevention is always better than cure, right? Okay. So by talking in the terms of return of incomes, I'm not saying that government will actually be convinced, but the thing is, it will be a good political point. Okay. I have saved this many lives this year. I have saved this much amount of GDP loss this year by investing in this. That is why I am able to invest in health. So no political party can, or no opposition party can criticize you for investing this much amount of money in health. And if the politicians fall into this trap, they they are creating their own hurdles, right? They can never go back. Yes. Definitely, Aditya, there is this concept of return of income, right? People have done surveys where they argue, I don't remember the facts, by investing in anti-smoking or by investing $1 in sanitation, we'll say $50 in something else. Such kind of return of incomes, ROIs have been published. Okay. And this is universal, not in one country. By saying this kind of targets in reverse fashion, we might change the political vocabulary, and that might encourage both people, political parties, opposition, everybody to start investing. Right? No, not facts. Again, it's the story. Please understand, I'm the first person to say people never change their minds through facts. Okay. What I am selling is a story. I'm selling that government of Andhra Pradesh should spend X amount of money. Okay. The story here is it will lead to a lot of savings. Okay. That has not been done by 75 years of independence. So it's a good political point to sell to the opposition parties and the government. Okay. And slowly we are dragging the politician into the trap of his own making. What will happen? Everybody will start talking in these stories, right? So why don't you invest in smoking? Why don't you invest in TV? Okay. Always remember, facts will never change the mind of the people. It's the stories that we tell behind the facts. When Dadabhai Nauroji said brain drain theory, okay, nobody remembers the GDP. Everybody remembers how the Britishers are exploiting us. Stories are very powerful. Okay. So now I think we have discussed everything and anything about this particular article, either about privatization, the way forward for your answer writing, the return of income concept. Please keep an eye on the return of income concept also, right? And then this nullifying debate, whether it should be private or public, will be removed by insurance and universal healthcare services. So that also has to be invested. Yes. So sedition law, Britain has and is trust a factor for private sector space? Definitely not. I think the private sector was able to successfully attract more patients because of less frictions. The best doctors are actually with the government hospitals. But how do I put it? Why do you prefer second class AC or third class AC over sleeper compartment? right? So it's that feel. Okay, we have a negative feel towards the government hospitals. They are filled with pan, gutka, bidi, and lack of hygiene, whereas private hospital is full of sanitizer smell. Okay, so that perception, the parking, yeah, movies, parking, and all these things. That is where we have to beat the perception. Now coming to sedition, Lord Macaulay, and of course some kind of trust will be there, right? Because the best of the doctors will be going to the private sector automatically. There will be some kind of better amenities, better treatment will be available. No, I mean, we still have a lot more time to discuss about health, right? We will move on. Already it's time's up. Now, sedition quickly. Lord Macaulay has framed the IPC, right? So we have a colonial hangover. The same colonials or the Britishers who gave the sedition law to India have repealed the sedition law from their own statute books in 2009. But we love legacy. We are emotional people, right? So we are still continuing with the sedition law. So as of now, the suggestion is, as yesterday Aditya was mentioning, not to repeal the sedition law, but to give safeguards, clear-cut guidelines. But as I have also pointed out, clear-cut guidelines have already been mentioned, but nobody is following them. Here, it's not about whether guidelines are given or sedition is removed or not, which should be repealed, by the way. Yes. It's the intention behind the political masters. And the most important thing is not a single political party can claim that we are immune from applying sedition. Every political party or major political party in India has used this and exploited this particular laws. So there are no heroes in this story about from political side. We need a change. No. So this article is about population. It will be prudent for us not to discuss too much about population article. Again, we have discussed Qureshi, we have discussed Prasanna. Now, the only thing we should remember in this particular article, the takeaway is, it's the lack of governance that is the problem, not the population. People will always be people. The same people can be molded. As I keep saying in the classes, Indians are very gullible. They can be fine-tuned to whatever you want them to do. Yes. So don't blame population, don't blame people, blame your failures. Okay. Because you did not invest in education, because you did not invest in health or education or behavioral awareness, people are like that. It's not the other way around. If you educate them, they will be educated. We have seen yesterday the Mitali Sethi article, right? If a tribal hamlet where people from most backward and vulnerable sections can be educated, modified, their behaviors can be changed. Why not the rest of the population? So this Malthusian theory won't apply to India. Actually, they are not a liability; they are an asset. People have always been an asset to this country. Everybody is unique. They have talents, lot of potential, skills. It's really mind blowing. The thing we are limiting ourselves is by not unleashing that human capital. So we should work on unleashing the human capital, just like unleashing the animal spirits, right? Okay. So governance is what is missing. And we cannot blame them for their status. Okay. Can we say China as an example, which is pushing for increasing of population? China has its own issues, right? It has followed a spectacular bad policy. Now it is coming back to bite it. One quick article I encourage you to remember is this. All of you remember the Nagaland issue, right? Manipur RTI activist NSCN, Naga Socialist Movement. National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Mumbai Group and other groups. Now, when we discussed this around 6 or 7 months ago, I told you they have an army of their own. They are running a parallel government. Instruments have become institutions. That is what I have told you. Just like the Naxalism, the Naga movement, which came to form, which was created to create a greater Nagalim for the welfare of the people of for the Naga people, has become an institution. They are extorting people. They have their own laws. They have their own taxation. and they're running parallel government within the democratically elected country, right? Knowing all these things, government is trying to make a peaceful deal with them so that the issue will be closed once and for all. Now, the thing is, because they are running a parallel government within the country itself, okay, the democratically applicable parliamentary laws are not functioning in the way they are supposed to function, right? So a lot of political capital has to be invested in this particular area, and there is a stalemate kind of thing. We are temporarily burying it. There is no discussion about Nagas. Okay, no political pressure, no drama, nothing is happening. So we almost forgot about it. And instruments which have become institutions are happy about it. I told you, right? Every splinter group want to have a discussion with the government. Why they don't want to solve the Naga issue? Because of such things. If I solve Naga issue, there is no way to exploit. Again, I'm not blaming the government here. What I'm trying to tell you is there is a stalemate because these people, these Naga groups don't want peace. They don't want permanent solution. If there is a permanent solution, I need to work in my day. I need to make a livelihood. As long as I'm an institution, right? Just like the Hamas in Palestine, I can keep exploiting my own people and I can keep exploiting the outsiders. Right? Does anyone see Rick and Morty? No, no one watches this show. Okay. Couple of seasons, okay, fine. Okay, no point. Forget about it. But those who see it, 5th season, 4th episode, you'll understand the context. Now, forget. Coming back to the major discussion, Aditya, government is more than willing to make peace with the Naga issues, right? But Naga groups don't want peace because they can keep exploiting the people. So that's an unfortunate scenario that is going in the country. This is one more success case study. In Gujarat, Prime Minister has constructed a world-class station through PPP model. That's the most important thing. So you can ask, why do we need to have such grandeur things? Because just a few minutes ago, we have discussed the perception about railway station is they are like this panpara, gutka, and all these things. But if you see this in this own country, you actually believe that we are capable of this. Right? It's a two-way street. Just for idea's sake. Okay, we will end the class with this last particular article, bringing in a all women's reservation, women's reservation bill, Trinamool Congress. So Trinamool Congress is saying that we should have a women's reservation bill, and Mr. Derek O'Brien, who is a member of Trinamool Congress, is saying 41% of the members of that particular political party are women. Okay, it can be a very deceiving percentages, lies, damn lies, and statistics. If you are sending 4 people out of TMC and 2 of them are women, you cannot claim 50% of them are women. Okay, they are only 2. So don't go by statistics. But a very interesting idea we can think about is, why can't we have a all women parliament for the next parliamentary session? Like, let's say 18th parliament, I guess. 18th Lok Sabha can be all women Lok Sabha. Every political party everywhere should give all the seats only to women. Like, let women rule this country for 5 years. Let men have a break. They have taken the burden for 75 years. They are tired, right? So 2024 elections, each and every political party in India should give tickets only to women. No reservation bill, no nothing. Or at least the major political parties are Indian National Congress or some political party can announce this radical change where each and every person will only be a female member, including the prime minister candidate. How utopian. Okay. It's okay, but the question arises why? Okay. Just for a change. Or I believe in this idea. If I want a car, I will start with an aeroplane. You know why not Manogna? If I am Rahul Gandhi, I will throw this bomb on the BJP, right? No, not Rick and Marty. Thank God, Rick will never allow that, not even in the worst imagination. Problem of proxy governance may arise. You are underestimating women. Okay. No, what's wrong with that? Let's imagine Congress, Indian National Congress announcing this bomb that all the okay, sorry, Santosh. Okay, fine. So let's say all the 545 seats that we are going to stand will be women. Just imagine the moral pressure that it will put on other political parties. And all the patriarchal discussions will come out, right? Like all women cannot rule, there should be some men. So that will at least generate a huge amount of discussion in women empowerment, right? So I only see win-win scenario. I don't see any why ECI Congress. I am Congress, right? I'm giving tickets only to women. No, why? If, I will be very happy if that actually happens, right? India will be changing in a good way. See, to make the deaf hear, I am taking the Bhagat Singh's stand more or less. So when I drop such a bomb, right, there will be a lot of fruitful debate, and many young women who never actually prepared for UPSC will start thinking about, what is women empowerment. Having feministic ideology is one thing, and having empowerment is one more thing. Then the debates will come. Why do we actually need women MPs? Are they making any difference? Productivity, what are their problems? And no single saner person can say women cannot be a prime minister. It will create a moral pressure. There may be women's reservation bill be passed. Yeah. I asked for the aeroplane. I got the reservation bill. No, Manogna is offended for some reason. I'm killing multiple birds with one stone. Sir, I think when we address the questions why and show the results, I think it can be pushed for it. Again, I cannot show results for something I haven't done. No country in the world has actually done this, right? All women parliament, I'm not sure about it. I might be wrong. See, for a party like INC, I think for Rahul Gandhi, it will be a killer bullet, right? I mean, again, not talking politics. Just think about it. Tell me, I'm totally open to the ideas. Fun jokes apart, like just under political gimmick. So my counter argument will be, not counter argument. My supportive argument will be, my counter argument will be, sorry, my supportive argument will be, when Indira Gandhi was made prime minister, she was supposed to be a Gungi Gudiya, right? Kamraj and the Congress coterie actually thought like she will be a proxy dummy. The syndicate thought she will be a dummy, but they realized that they started playing with the fire. Okay, so let's say 300 women MPs came out of this entire drama. both the political parties included, 30 tigresses will come out. I will still take it. See, I don't want to criticize anyone, but what is Nirmala Sitharaman doing? It's more of a political gimmick than actual empowerment, right? If you give me Sushma Swaraj, then I will say, yeah, actually she was an empowered woman. She made a visible difference. She brought a honor to the Ministry of External Affairs court, and she was loved by each and everyone. I haven't seen a single criticism against her. Yes, so we 50-50 chance. 150 dummies and 150 Sushma Swarajas. I will still take it. And I also think, communalism will come down at a bit lower unless we filled it with Sadhvi Pragyas. That's a different scenario. But communalism might come down, more compassionate. Even world leaders might be persuaded very easily. And above all, a girl studying third class or fourth class will start believing that actually this country can change. More soft power, yeah, definitely. Infrastructural changes will happen, right? I was watching some documentary or some ISRO, something. Okay, so women, most government buildings never had a toilet, women hall toilets. Okay, so that was a stage. From that to we reached a lot of difference. Yes, in recent times, countries ruled by women were managed better by New Zealand. What I personally believe is sometimes the ideas that are created out of nothing, though may have a lot of negatives, will change the things forever. Because Gmail was created in ideal time that Google offered. Like Google offered 1 hour free time. Like you can persuade your own personal choices, personal programs, right? So, I'm totally open to these suggestions. It can be totally utopian. Lucky for so many politicians in India, none of these things are going to be ever implemented. But the thing is, it's a food for thought. Think about it. Think about it deeply, seriously. If you have to write a essay on women topic, the things you think, like how a MP for defense or MP for let's say education, health. We have seen that Sailaja teacher in Kerala. She is a teacher. She is a minister. Right? She was kicked out even after performing because of the political compulsions. Right? Think of India with 150. You know what? Again, the golden rule should be not the wife of the present MP. Okay, of course. That will be totally win-win for Manogna, right? I mean, whatever she is telling will become true. You asked us to support a female candidate. We are posting the wife of the present minister. So the husband and wife are just interchanging the power. No, not that. Truly someone like a college student, a professor, a teacher, a social worker, a Safai Karamchari. Find them, give them the seats, and just see the magic that will happen. Again, I don't think there is such a political party or a political leader of that grandstanding in this entire country, right? All women political party. In case if at least 33% reservation achieved, it will be a win where no CJ is women and talks about the sensitivity and priority of the women. So just think about it. Are we successful in? Yeah, I think we found some gems in local self-government. But again, it will be a very wrong tree to bark at because it's like saying we have given them political power, but we did not give them financial power. They don't have any political power whatsoever. Biju Janata Dal has done it again. All women, like top to bottom women, no men involved. Local self-governments are definitely a hit with women reservation, because around 21 states are 21 states have given 50% of the reservation to women. Okay, but the problem is
that's what's the first rather than.
Sorry? No. What I'm trying to tell you is you have empowered them, okay, but they don't have the funds or they don't have the capacity, right? I cannot show you a visible difference at local self-government level, because it's not the failure of the woman, it's the failure of the devolution of power. To show the path to the country. How did that thought arise? I just saw that article and I thought like, okay, why this reservation? Why not have an all-women parliament? So I written it down then and there only. So if you like that idea, just think about it, ponder about it, suggest me pros and cons in your free time, discuss with your friends. We will mainstream that idea. I can see the Plato's Philosopher's Queen. I haven't read that. Yes. Why don't we make the women's CGA voluntarily from Collegium? If I know how the Collegium works, then we can think about it, Nagasai. But I don't think judiciary is ready for that. And there are hardly any women justices in the board. See, my only intention here is to bring political pressure on all the politicians to pass the, to bring some change seriously. I'm fed up with, Sharad Pawar, the same names again and again. We need new faces in politics. Okay. Yes. And lastly, if I'm Rahul Gandhi, if I want my party to survive, I will definitely do this, either stupid idea or a really miraculous idea. I don't know what it is. I will definitely implement it. Okay. Luckily, no one is asking me. Nor you. Yeah. But from UPSC point of view, please let me know. One alternative answer for what? Why? Okay, why? Okay, why? I personally feel a sensitivity will be brought into the entire system. Okay, the motherly touch that woman brings to anything that she works in. I mean, that compassionate side. Men will never have that compassionate side, right? I never met Sushma Swaraj, but from her tweets, from her actions, I can feel that warmth and understandingness from her actions. I never have felt that from Jaishankar. He might have done more work. He might have done some extraordinary work, okay, as a foreign affairs minister. But the warmth that Sushma Swaraj brought to the entire Twitter or to the diplomatic circles, I somehow couldn't feel it with Ajay Shankar as a human being, probably. Okay, I felt the warmth. Okay, if Nelson Mandela makes me feel warm, yeah, I will break that prejudice. Okay. Again, I never said sensitive. I felt she made me feel warm. She was also defense minister, right? I remember her photo standing among all the defense ministers. She was the shortest. She was wearing a sari, but she was standing very tall. I hope you have seen that photo. If you haven't, Google that. Defense Minister Sushma Swaraj. Everybody was in a military dress, very, very tall fellow, 6 feet. but she was very tiny, short, but she brought that majesticness to the thing. So I don't think they are sensitive and always caring. She know when to beat and she know when to apply the ointment. So maybe that is what India needs right now. Again, as I said, just after this class, nobody's implementing all these things, right? Thousands of debates will happen. If that actually that idea has to hit some mainstream. The thing is, have an idea. Aravind Sameta last dialogue. Okay. Again, Trivikram is a very cunning fellow. He used the machismo throughout the movie and applied some ointment. Okay. I think we will end the discussion here. Think about it. Women's reservation bill. Out of all these things, if we can still gain some more few genuine MPs who are empowered, I will consider that as win-win. I would love constructive criticisms as always. See you Monday, same time, 7 p.m. Yes.